Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, the conclusion of our Top 25 Players 23 and Under podcast series. I've got Cole Zwicker on the line with me. Cole, we've recorded all of these on the same day. I mean, we should probably just eschew the niceties and move forward into discussing prospects.
Absolutely, and I think that just for some consistency, the caffeine is wearing off a little bit, so just bear with me on this one.
So before we get into this, I want to just note here. The top tier, like this order on these top 8, it's fucking impossible. Like, I have no super strong faith on this, which is typically, like, I'm a fairly opinionated human being. Like, I have thoughts on things. This is one of those times where if you tell me I am losing my mind and, like, you know, how can you have X over Y? I get it. Like, this is just me kind of, I'm not throwing darts at a board. Like, I have an opinion, but it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, especially because two of the more established players on most prospect lists, they just didn't qualify for this. Giannis and Embiid would be the two top guys. So that makes it even harder because I feel pretty decent conviction with those guys, having them at least with Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell for me. But some of these guys are leans. You have to have some kind of opinion on their upside. Otherwise, like, you can't really do this list effectively. Yeah,
and we're at the stage now where I think all of these guys are either NBA All-Stars or future NBA All-Stars. Yeah, I mean, the other issue is, like, two of them have suffered significant injuries and, you know, like, I don't know. It's hard. We should just jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall you're going to be fine here. Most of these players have proven at a young age that they're very fucking good at basketball. So it's more just splitting hairs on a lot of these guys. I think you might get some shit for 8, but again, you have to have your own opinions and they have to be, like, consistent. I think that does a lot for the reputability of a player or a person who breaks down the draft all the time. So without further ado, I guess that was a nice segue into 8.
Yeah, I mean, DeAndre Ayton is number 8. I've been very clear throughout this process how I feel about DeAndre Ayton. I think he is like a future top superstar big man in the NBA. That, you know, people who've been listening to this podcast, that will not come as a surprise. People who've been reading my work, that will not come as a surprise. He is just such an incredible physical freak. 7'1", 7'6" wingspan, 260 pounds of pure muscle, 40+ inch vertical leap, like all of the strength in the world to be a great post-up threat, all of the mobility in the world to be able to switch 1 through 5 defensively and be stuck on an island, all of the potential to be able to shoot it because he has enough touch to where I think he's going to be able to shoot it, just hasn't proven it at the level that these players above him have. And the reason that I feel comfortable placing him above a guy like a Jaylen Brown, who is averaged 18 points a game in the playoffs, a guy like a Jamal Murray or a Brandon Ingram who averaged 16 points a game last year on 45+% shooting from the field, I genuinely would have traded both of those players for the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Like, in a vacuum, like, I would have had no problem doing that.
And that's fair. I mean, I don't think listeners want to hear me go on DeAndre Ayton. I feel like I've talked about Ayton for literally 2 full days over the past year, literally 48 hours on different podcasts, so I have nothing more to add at this point. I would just say I think people should temper their immediate expectations more than they're doing. And I'm not saying I think Ayton's going to be good, but, like, if you are expecting him to be Dwight Howard right out of the gate, Dwight Howard was like a perennial defensive player of the year. He's one of the best defensive anchors over the last 2 decades. If you think he's going to be Shaquille O'Neal, who was literally the most coordinated and athletic big I've ever seen, the most dominant player, honestly, in basically in NBA history, if that is where you're setting the bar, he's going to fail that expectation out of the gate. He's just not going to meet that. So I think that's important to keep that in context. Even if you are really high on him, he's not going to be that from day one. I don't think he's going to be that generally, but it's very unreasonable to expect that out of the gate. I just want that context point, just because I see a lot of Suns fans doing that, and it's not good for anybody.
I will predict that he has a better rookie season than Dwight Howard's rookie season, though. Dwight Howard averaged 12 points, 10 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks per 33 minutes, a night. He started every game as a rookie. 52% from the field. I predict that DeAndre Ayton exceeds both the points and the rebounds per game, and is close to the blocks and shoots a higher percentage from the field.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I think the percentage from the field, for sure. The rebounds, I think Ayton's going to be right around that point. So that's pretty equal. Blocks, I don't think Ayton's going to reach 1.7 blocks personally, but I just think the defensive impact outside of the counting stats is not going to be the same. I just don't think so. Based on what I've seen from Ayton, it's going to take him more time to pick up the nuances of NBA defense. If you ever expect him to anchor one. Again, I think Dwight Howard had elite instincts. He was one of the best defensive players of my personal generation of watching basketball. So as far as impact, I don't think it's going to be the same. As far as points and rebounds, I can definitely see that on efficient usage.
Yeah, and look, like I'm not sitting here and saying that DeAndre Ayton is going to be, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, Dwight Howard, but Dwight Howard did not start super great defensively. The Orlando Magic were 2 points better per 100 possessions when Dwight was off the floor than when he was on the floor defensively during that rookie season. It takes guys time, and It takes a lot of hard work to make players very good defensively. And I'm just going to, point out that I think DeAndre's ceiling defensively is much higher than what I think Cole thinks it is at the very least.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it.
Do we need to litigate more of the DeAndre Ayton battles?
No, I think people know kind of where we come down on this. If you listen to the podcast, it's pretty clear. I think it might sometimes get overstated if I don't like Ayton. That's never been the case. I do like him. I'm just not as high on him as Sam is.
Yeah, you had him at third on your board, right? You had him below Jaren and below Luka.
No, I had him fifth.
You had him fifth? You had Trae ahead of him. That's right. Who was the other one?
I had Wendell ahead of him as well.
Okay.
But they were in the same tier. But they were really close in the same tier. So it's not like a huge variance. I did have Luka and Jaren concretely ahead of him, and then I had more strong leans towards other players.
Yeah. So, look, I get it. DeAndre is going to be a little bit divisive, but overall, I am confident that he is going to be, at some point, like a 20-12 guy. That's just where I'm at on him. I think he is going to be an all-star level center. Number 7, Kristaps Porzingis. This is lower than I would like to have Porzingis in a vacuum. Obviously he's coming off of a season where he was unbelievable when he was on the floor. Made his first All-Star game, averaged 23 points, 7 rebounds, shot 44% from the field, 39.5% from 3, 80% from the foul line almost. Is very genuinely one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, averaged 2.4 blocks. Anytime you look at his numbers in terms of his ability to contest shots at the basket, those are always extremely high and among the league leaders. Yeah, it's right around 52%, something in that. So 8% better than league average. This is all about, I've been pretty vocal in the past that if he was healthy, I would take Porzingis over Nikola Jokic, because I just buy into the idea of Porzingis's game translating a little bit better to the playoffs than Jokic's. But I can't do that because the injury history is too strong at this stage. The body type continues to scare me. And, he's coming off of genuine ACL surgery. If it was, again, if this was purely based off of talent and that's it, I would probably have Porzingis at 3 on this list maybe. But you just have to knock it for the lack of, solid feeling about his potential injury history.
Definitely fair. And that was going to be my question. If he was perfectly healthy, how would you rate him compared to Karl Towns? I mean, Towns is a better self-creator. They're both really good shooters, but Porzingis is a much better rim protector, traditionally. So how would you kind of compare those two?
I still have faith in Towns reaching a certain level as a rim protector, so I think I would still take Towns, and I think that is who I would have him below. I would have him below Towns.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's how I would lean as well. I'd have him just below. Porzingis is a little tougher because I don't know. It just depends on the passing for me. If he can meet a threshold of acceptable passing, I'd like him a lot more. He added that ability to shoot over the top out of the post, self-create. adding to his rim protection and three-point shooting. And I think where he differs from a guy like Myles Turner and why he's so far ahead of the list is he's a real shooter from three on high volume, can do it off the move as well. More of a self-creator in the post. I think he can get a shot easier than Myles Turner can. He's a little bit more mobile on the perimeter, even though that's his limiting factor on defense, and he's a better pure rim protector as far as instincts go. So
what he is he's 4 inches taller and a better shooter than Myles Turner. Like they're similar players, to be honest. It's just that like Porzingis is 4 inches taller and a more pure shooter. Like that's what it comes down to. And that size difference makes him a better rim protector. It makes him more capable of shooting over the top. Makes him just generally a better basketball player, and that's fine. But it's not saying that Myles Turner is a deficient basketball player because he's only 6'11" and has a 7'4.5" wingspan. But Porzingis being 7'3" with like a 7'8" wingspan, that's big. Like that absolutely adds up.
Definitely, I was trying to suss out the difference between why you had Porzingis 7 and Myles Turner 20. I think that it's very reasonable. I would have the same opinion, and it's because of Porzingis' shot diversity. He's just a better shooter, and I think he's got better instincts defensively as a rim protector. So those things add up, and we'll see if Porzingis can create plays on a short roll, for example. I don't know. It's hard to be that fluid moving with the ball when you're 7'3". It's just very awkward as far as mobility, but he can get to his pull-up a little bit too. So it all comes down to health. I think he's already established himself as a really good player. I mean, he's an excellent player. We'll see how it translates to the playoffs, how he can play in space. Very curious on that if the Knicks get to that point. Just very curious. Similar to Jokic, I expect him to be better than Jokic in space defensively, of course, with the rim protection, but I want to see how he holds up in those kinds of settings. Yeah, for me,
he's already a top 30 player in the NBA when he's healthy, I think. That's just being real. I think he is just so good in the NBA already. The problem is that you have to downgrade because of the health. I want Porzingis to be healthy, as much as I want anything for any player in the NBA, because I think he can be an absolute superstar level player who can bring New York back and who can make the NBA a lot more of a fun place, right? You just can't buy it right now. You can't assume that health.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also Joel Embiid historically has health issues too, but when he's played at his optimum point, his ceiling is higher than Porzingis. He's just a better defensive player, and he can do more offensively. He's not nearly the shooter, of course, and his decision-making leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I actually might take Porzingis as an offensive player.
That's tough. I think I might. Yeah, that's really tough because Embiid just dictates matchups so much more. He'll just beat you in the post if you can't downsize against him. I don't think you can really downsize against Porzingis, but I'm not sure he's efficient enough yet on those shots. So we'll kind of see. I definitely get the argument for that, but
to me, it's decision making too, though. Embiid obviously has the turnover issues right now. Porzingis, you're talking about a guy that never turns the ball over.
He also never passes though. That's the thing is he's going to shoot over the top. That's basically his go-to, but he's not really going to create for others pass out of the post. But I think that's almost kind of a wash. Just trying to get it again, contextualizing Porzingis in the realm of all these bigs. If Embiid, he definitely has injury concerns as well, but I think we've just seen a higher ceiling, and that's why you would have him over Porzingis in a vacuum. I think, right?
Yeah, no, I mean Joel Embiid is, for my money, probably the second best defensive player in the NBA. He is just so unbelievable as a rim protector. He's so unbelievable as he can actually go out and switch a little bit defensively. Everything he does on the defensive end is just better than Kristaps does. He takes up more space inside. He's a better rebounder by far. The two just aren't really comparable to me on defense. It'd be I'm not going to make a ridiculous comparison, but it's just a totally different strata of player. And yeah, I think that they're very close offensively, but that's the difference between Joel Embiid being a top 10 player when healthy in the NBA versus Porzingis being a top 30 player when healthy right now.
Very much so. And just one last point on Porzingis from me. We talked about this with Lauri Markkanen, the unique ability to shoot off movement, 131 possessions last year, 115 attempts. He's dynamic. There are not a lot of guys his size that can do that.
Yep, totally agree. And Penny also maybe agrees.
That's a hard concurrence right there.
Thanks, Penny. So we're going to move into the top tier now. This is a big group at tier 1. Typically, I would not have a tier this big. And the last two guys on this list, I don't know that I would they're almost in a tier by themselves to me almost. Maybe it would have been better to kind of split it out, but I just kind of did it this way because I'm an idiot. But I went Nikola Jokic, number 6. To me, I mean, like, he is probably... Is he better than Karl Towns offensively? I don't know yet. He's close.
I think that isn't that kind of preference driven? Like, would you rather have more of the playmaker or more of the scorer? Like, I think it's pick or choose because they both bring different skill sets, but they're both elite at those skill sets.
Yeah, I think we're going to get to Towns at some point. Like, obviously I would rather have Towns given the fact that we haven't talked about him yet. But the problem with Jokic definitely comes on defense, but let's get to the offensive side first. He is in a tier of Karl Towns, DeMarcus Cousins, and him offensively that, to me, best center in the NBA offensively. Like, you can make a case for any of those three. And then depending on where you put Anthony Davis as well. Like, if you want to toss Anthony Davis into this mix, AD is better than all of these guys, but it just depends on how you want to classify them positionally.
100% agree. I think you can make cases for all of them. Jokic has his extreme positive qualities, the best decision maker for a 5 that I've seen over the last 20 years. Like, frankly, he makes awesome reads. Dribble handoffs, you can run your offense through him. I think he's the one guy I actually think for a big that you can kind of argue you can run your offense through, like fully, even in the playoffs. I think he's that good of a decision maker. He can dribble, pass, shoot. He's good. He's big enough. He can get position on the block too. So he's not just somebody like Anthony Davis struggles a little bit with that at times against like the Warriors, for example. Yep. I think that Jokic can always carve out spots and make high level reads from there. So again, very, very unique player with the ability to space the floor and then be that offensive vehicle for a high level offense.
39.6% from 3 last year on 280 attempts. That was a big jump from years 1 and year 2, and it's totally changed the way that the Nuggets can run half-court offense. Like, they can full-on run everything through him now because he's such a threat as a scorer from the perimeter, not only as a mismatch problem, from the mid-range or from the high post or low post. Like, you can really just kind of do everything with Jokic there. Rebounding, he is a better defensive rebounder than what I think he gets credit for. Pretty good offensive rebounder, has very good instincts overall on the glass. The best big man passer in the NBA. I mean, if you want to call Ben Simmons, given the fact that Ben is, I think, just as tall as Jokic, like, okay, I'll say, yeah, Ben is better. But in terms of like true centers, he is the best center passer in the NBA for sure. Everything about his offensive game is just so fun to watch and also translatable to both the regular season and the playoffs. Like, he's someone that I expect to murder offensively in the playoffs.
He's one of the few guys that are deficient in space defense, but are good enough offensively that you could still possibly win that trade-off, depending on who the opponent is. Maybe not against Steph Curry, but against most lead guards, I think you might be able to win that trade-off. That's how damn good he is. This is one of the most divisive players in the league. Kind of encompasses the eye test versus analytics, whatever the hell that means, Twitter. Yeah. I don't get why he's that divisive, frankly. Like, he's obviously very fucking good at basketball. If you're saying like if you say like he's the best player in the league, yeah, that's a divisive comment to make. But if you think he's like a top 15, top 20 player, like, I don't see how that's divisive. Like, he's put this over multiple years. He's a core part of one of the best offenses in the league. I just don't get it. I mean, I get the space defense. We'll see how it does in the playoffs. I don't suspect it'll be that great, especially if he goes against the Rockets, for example. I think people can acknowledge both things. Like, he's maybe a little bit better defensively than he gets credit for with his positioning, with his positional size, all of that. But he's probably going to be a liability in space.
He's going to be a liability in space, and he is arguably the worst rim protecting center in the NBA. Like, he gives up so many different areas defensively. He's very bad on that end. Like, I get that people want to make the white big man argument. He's so good at positioning, or the European, like, oh yeah, he's like Marc Gasol out there. Any advanced number in terms of rim protection thinks he is very bad. Like, just an absolute train wreck. And that's a problem for the Nuggets. Like, that is going to potentially hamper them in terms of the way that they continue to build out their roster. Where they go from here is a significant question, because the fact that he gives up 67.9% to opponents at the basket and contests 7 shots a game at the basket, that's a nightmare. And the fact that he can't really guard in space, that is a nightmare. Like, in a vacuum, when I originally did this, it was hard for me to even consider having Jason Tatum ahead of him, But then I thought about the way that Jokic's game on defense really might translate very badly to the playoffs. And it was hard for me not to knock him down below that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. When I talk about his defensive acumen, I think he's fine in the regular season. I think he's good enough as far as knowing where to be, that he's been, by like indicators like defensive real plus minus or whatever, he's usually a slight positive. So I don't think he's like some dreadful defender in the regular season, but that's not really what we're talking about. It's more like how does he profile to winning, and we haven't really seen him in that context yet. I really want to see what happens when maybe even like an average or like a all-star level lead guard, let's say Damian Lillard, somebody of that ilk just attacks him on basically every play. How does he hold up? Yeah. You don't expect it to be well, but I just want to see it. You know what I mean? I want to see how he holds up. How much can he get back on the other end? He just hasn't played in a high leverage situation. I think that kind of adds to the animosity of the debate some, just because it's like, oh, this guy's never even made the playoffs or whatnot. But it's
silly.
It's not really his fault. I mean, he's doing all he can there. I just want to see him in a more high leverage situation. But I agree with what you said about Tatum. In the modern game, it kind of behooves you in some respects to not take anything off the table if you're a certain kind of player. You know what I mean? Like, just being above average at everything can get you a long way. That kind of versatility when you're not a mismatch target. So, of course, you're not going to run offenses at Jason Tatum. You're going to do that against Jokic, and we just got to see how he holds up against that.
Yeah, so, like, the real plus-minus stuff with Jokic on defense, like, I can't buy it. Like, straight up. I just cannot buy it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I will say, sorry to interrupt, but this is something that Jay-Z Majlish, who is incredibly good at advanced numbers and all that, he actually wrote like a 30-minute piece on this on the Stepien a while back, breaking down every single component of his advanced numbers via real plus minus and all of that. So I would encourage those. I know Adam Maris retweeted this a while back. I would encourage those to go on the site and look at that. I'm not as in tune with the subtleties of all that, but I thought it was a pretty convincing argument for those that are, I guess, analytically inclined.
Yeah, so like a lot of, from what my understanding is, real plus minus accounts for effects on teammates, right? Like the fact that the Nuggets are 2 points per 100 possessions better defensively than when Nikola Jokic is off the floor will play a heavy factor in the fact that he is a slightly positive real plus minus, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to misquote anything. Like I said, I don't get into the subtleties of these advanced metrics because they're, somewhat complicated algorithms and whatnot. So I don't want to misquote anything. So I'm going to recuse myself from this.
Yeah, like, so I've just kind of looked into before what goes into this. Like, from what I know, it's not like what ESPN's is, at least, is not fully public, right?
I don't think the calculation is fully public, no.
And like the definition of defensive real plus minuses, players' average impact on his team's defensive performance by points allowed per 100 possessions. So like the fact that Nikola Jokic last year played with Paul Millsap and played with Jamal Murray, who again I think is like a slightly positive defender, it helps him in comparison to their other lineups, which can be a little bit rough defensively. And I'm trying to use my words carefully here. The fact that the Nuggets still have a 110.7 defensive rating with him on the floor is a problem. Like, even though he's playing with relatively good defenders, like it's still a significant problem that this team can't get stops. Like, that we're being real about it. Like, they cannot get stops. I
don't think Jokic, and this is my own input. Again, if you want another perspective on advanced stats and stuff, Jacob Goldstein does player impact plus minus. That is another excellent resource to seek out. You'll be able to
very good at it. I agree with that.
Yeah, so I would seek out the experts, quote unquote, here, even though I do think Jacob's actually an expert, of course, at his own algorithm.
And look, like I'm definitely not an expert on this. Like I know the inputs relatively well, but like I'm not an expert on this. I will say that.
Yeah, I know the inputs relatively well, but I don't even speak on it because I don't want to misquote anything. But I do think that we can just use common sense, the eye test, and see that Jokic is probably not going to anchor a maybe even above average, definitely not an elite defense. Like I think that's a fair statement to make at this juncture. Yeah,
like that's where I'm at on it. I mean, it's just hard for me to buy into that. I mean, like, so I'm looking at real plus minus right now, trying to find Jokic. Hold on, I should probably just do a control find. That would make the most sense, I think.
I will say one thing really quick while you do that. comparatively to Karl Towns, I think that Jokic is a smarter defender from what I've seen. He maximizes his athleticism, let's say, more than Towns. Towns is just his positioning, his effort level aren't there.
Sure.
I think you'd probably have more faith in Towns figuring it out just because of his physical tools, and he moves better than Jokic. But I don't necessarily think that that's a total lock either. Like, I look at both of these bigs, and the primary input is definitely offense, right? It just comes down to Towns has better athletic upside on the defensive end, even though I don't think he has the instincts as Jokic does.
Sure. I think that's reasonably fair. Towns is not a good rim protector right now either. 64.4% on the shots that he does contest at the basket. And there are a lot of times where he doesn't contest at the basket. I am intrigued by the fact that Minnesota just gives up a parade at the basket. Like, I think that there's something defensively, like, schematically there. Like, Andrew Wiggins gave up 71.4%. Gorgie Jang gave up 67.9%. Jimmy Butler gave up, what was the number? 66.5. Karl Towns gave up 64.4. Out of the 90 players who defended at least 3 shots at the basket and played 40 games last year, that is like 4 of the top 20 guys.
Great.
4 of the 20 worst guys in the NBA. That says a lot to me about just their scheme being a fucking nightmare more than anything. Like,
and that's kind of the antithesis of what Tibbs' scheme usually is, right? He's conservative. He wants to force those mid-range shots. They want to drop their big back and really defend the rim. So that just runs contrary to what you'd think the defense would look like schematically.
Right. Like, I just don't understand how that can happen, I guess. Like, I'm not... maybe at some point I will go back and watch the Minnesota defense and maybe I'll write about it for The Athletic. But, like, to me, that's a schematic issue more than it's... Like, there's no way all of these guys can be so fucking bad defensively at the rim.
It's an excellent question. I'm very curious to hear the answer from Timberwolves fans. If you want to chime in, kind of tweet at us after this and just give us what you think is the situation, because I think I can speak for you as well. Like, we don't really have time to watch every Minnesota Timberwolves game. So that'd be interesting.
I'm definitely not sitting here saying I watch every Minnesota Timberwolves game. I did probably watch like 20, and they were definitely just messy defensively. But I'm surprised that their defensive impact numbers are this bad.
They shouldn't be. I mean, I don't think that Wiggins and Towns played to the level that they could. I think they're both minus defenders, and that's kind of hard to survive. I don't think Teague's a plus defender. From what I've seen, it's mostly Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson who are pulling the slack. So maybe you can't survive when you have kind of 3 negatives to your starting roster as far as defense. But I don't know. It'd be very interesting. I'm very curious to hear responses to this. Yeah.
And then for reference, this is a flip from last year. I did have Porzingis ahead of Jokic. The injury with Porzingis obviously throws Jokic ahead, and I think totally fairly. They slide back a couple of spots. Jokic slides back 1 spot. Porzingis slides back 3 spots just because of the emergence of this rookie class. Like, that's honestly the only reason. Also, me being a fucking idiot whenever it came to evaluating Devin Booker last year. Like, that's just being real. But like, Jason Tatum is who I have at number 5, and I don't think he is as impactful a player as Nikola Jokic right now. I will say that. Like, I've no problem admitting that. I do think his game translates better to the NBA, or to the NBA playoffs. I think his game translates better to both sides of the floor. And I just buy into him continuing to work his ass off and get better. Like, I've just seen it. Like, I think he's going to keep getting wildly, ridiculously better.
It's that latter argument that has me with Tatum, because that's basically the reason I undervalued him in the draft, was because of his work ethic. The way he improved his shot already to become like one of the best shooters in the league.
Yeah.
Talked about that. He's already working on his finishing. The guy is just super self-aware. Like, you see all the reports on Twitter of him this offseason really working on his finishing, which has always been kind of a negative for him. If he gets that down, I don't know, especially in the role he's going to play, I think he's going to kill. He's going to be one of the best guys in his role that we've seen. I want to see if he can expand, be that go-to scorer. He was at points in the playoffs, and I think that's definitely within his range of outcomes pretty comfortably. Let's see if he gets to that level as a passer as well. There's just there's elements that he can improve upon, but the fact that he's already so freaking valuable and he's so young and there is room for upside, I think he can get better. I don't buy the argument that he's so polished he can't improve. I don't believe that. I think that he can get better, and I think he will get better. I doubt his like very highest end ceiling outcome. I'm not sure if he's going to be like a top 3, top 4 generational kind of player, but I'm also not going to say he won't be at the same time because he's already so good, and I do think there are avenues for him to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why people would say that, sort of, but I also kind of don't. Like, he is very, very skinny still. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. The improvement that he's shown already in terms of passing and reading the play is remarkable. I think it's very, very high. And you look at the rookies who have done what Jason Tatum did, at like 21 years old or younger, we will say. Eric Gordon did it. Eric Gordon was a really, really good rookie that we thought was going to be a star, and then some injuries came up and held him up. Karl Towns,
good rookie,
yeah, like Karl Towns did it. And the numbers here we're talking about, 13.5 points a game, 58% true shooting percentage. Karl Towns, I think we think of him as a future Hall of Famer. Adrian Dantley, future Hall of Famer, or definite Hall of Famer. Shaquille O'Neal, Hall of Famer. Magic Johnson, Hall of Famer. Charles Barkley, Hall of Famer. Michael Jordan, Hall of Famer. Buck Williams is another player that exists in this sample. He is a guy that was one-time All-NBA, 3-time All-Star, 4-time All-Defensive Team. Was a star for a while in the NBA and was especially a star early in his career. So if that's like your worst outcome in this group, I guess maybe Eric Gordon is your worst outcome, and that was kind of sidelined due to injuries. And Eric Gordon did it on a really shitty basketball team. It's hard for me to look at Jason Tatum and go, yeah, he's not going to get better. He's going to keep getting better. He's going to keep getting as far as he can to being just unbelievable, I think, at this game of basketball and in the NBA. If he was an all-star next year, it wouldn't surprise me, right?
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, his work ethic, again, is an A+. I think we can say that. The guy is going to work his ass off. I don't think he's ever going to get to, let's say, 2016 Kawhi Leonard level for his archetype. I don't think he's ever going to be that good defensively because it's fucking hard to be that good defensively. Kawhi is arguably the best perimeter defender of the last, I don't know how long. It's unreal. Maybe since Scottie Pippen. But that level of shooting, I think that Tatum can maybe get to that point. That's the avenue I think he can get to, and he's one of the only guys I can see getting to that from the wing. He's just he profiles to be such an elite shooter now, where he can bring that kind of value. But we're still talking about, I think he can be a top 10 player in the league.
And we're not talking about him, shooting is not his best skill. His ability to create space is his best skill.
Oh, I think shooting's his best skill, just straight up.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that is what he's shown. I think his first step's good. He's deceptive. I don't think he's a nuclear athlete as far as getting to the rim. He's got great stride length. We talked about this. But finishing pop, I'm not sure if that's ever going to be there. That kind of goes in concert with one-on-one creation. But, yeah, he can jab step you and then pull up over the top. That kind of goes – I'm kind of treating that as shooting, pull-up shooting. Mm-hmm. He can get to his spot. But I think what differentiates him, Ingram can get to his spots too. He's just nowhere near the caliber of shooter that Tatum is. And I think that's the separating skill. That's why he's so freaking good.
It's the separating skill, but I don't think it's the best skill. That's
interesting. Does
that make sense?
It kind of does. This is tough. This is kind of the Trae Young argument where his passing is his best skill, shooting is the most important. Yeah. I think that Tatum is. I think it might apply differently to Tatum. I think his best skill, his most adept skill is shooting so far, and I think that's also the most important. If he wasn't this caliber of shooter, would you have as much interest in him? Probably not, right? Even if he can create space at a pretty damn good level. If he didn't have the shooting to back it up, I don't know if that's the same. It's definitely not the same caliber of player, right?
Just going to point out, I was as interested last year when he was not a 43% three-point shooter.
You were.
I think he's just ridiculously good at getting space. And I assumed the shooting would come along at some point. I'll be frank, I never thought he would shoot 43% from three.
Neither did I, sir.
In his life. And he did. That totally changed the game. He shot 43% from three on 240 attempts last year. It's ridiculous how good of a shooter he was. And I think part of it was a hot streak early in the year, but he was consistent enough to where it never, I don't think he had a month below 36%, did he?
I don't think so. And just to be clear about this, I'm not saying he's bad at creating space. He's good at it. He was pasting
No,
times in the playoffs. But like you look at catch and shoot for regular season, he was in the 94th percentile last year. Dribble pull-ups, he was in the 81st percentile with 217 pull-up attempts. He's unreal as a shooter. I think that is, honestly, I don't expect that. Maybe you expect a little bit of a dip because he could regress, but the fact that he is already so established there, like I don't think it was some kind of fluke. Like maybe he drops 4 percentage points, maybe he's high 30s, for example. I think that's reasonable. I don't expect him to shoot, like, I don't know, 50% from three like he did like the first 2 months of the season or whatever. But the fact he's this established as a shooter, man, this gives you so much avenues to value because he can defend, he can switch, and he can shoot the ball at a very limit. That's his like super floor, and he's much more than that already. You know what I mean? So if those are your bankable skills, I mean, you have a lot of room for improvement, and he's already so valuable.
So the big room for improvement here is the finishing around the basket. Only finished at a 49.8% clip last year. I think that he does get overstated as a finisher often because his finishes look so sexy. Like those long extension finishes, they look great. Like he'll occasionally rise up and like throw down with authority whenever he gets like a bit of room to like really leap and like go after the basket. But he needs to get a little bit better. He needs to become like an average finisher at the basket, I think, to really continue to take that next step forward.
And I like the fact that he's so cognizant of that again. He's already working on that this offseason. He's aware of that. He's probably going to perfect some of the timing stuff. He did lose the ball a lot. He even talked about this as far as going up for layups and losing the ball, trying to get stronger with his hands and stuff like that. So, I just think he's a really, really self-aware player. We'll see that coming up with Donovan Mitchell again. And that's why I think that he might be a better bet to improve at a rate you wouldn't expect. Again, a lot of the narrative is like he's already so polished. How much better can he really get? How much better can he really shoot? I get the shooting. I mean, like if he gets much better at shooting, then he's going to be like an all-time shooter. But as far as the ancillary stuff, creating space, creating for others, finishing at the rim especially, I do think he can get better.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I'm going to give a prediction on Jason Tatum. I'm going to say he averages, even on this Celtics team, which has Gordon Hayward coming back, has Kyrie Irving for a full season, has Marcus Morris for a full season. I think Jason Tatum averages 17.5, 5 and 2.5 assists a game. And maybe he doesn't make an all-star game, but like is, again, like right around 60 true shooting percentage.
It's just kind of unfair that he's going to play the role he's going to play, which is I think he's going to go back to more of the Otto Porter, supercharged Otto Porter role in that team because they're going to run so much of their offense through Kyrie, through Al Horford. And he's already shown that he is already historically good at that role. He can already do so much. He's one of the best closeout attackers I've seen. As far as aggressiveness, he's got a great deceptive jab. He can go both ways on you. So in that role, he's already shown it. He can be a high-level contributor to winning in that role.
You know what I would love for Boston to do? I would love them to let him run second unit.
That'd be dope. I would love to see that myself.
Obviously he would murder second units because he damn well near murders first units. But like that would be, just given the amount of creation they're going to have on their like first unit, they're going to have Gordon Hayward, they're going to have Kyrie Irving and Al Horford and these guys who are unbelievable passers and scorers and can be legit hubs of an offense. Yeah, just let him do his thing with second units. Like, just let him dominate those teams.
I selfishly just want to see it because I want to see how he progresses in like a one-on-one scenario. That's always been his deal, right?
Yeah.
He's like, everybody's like, he's this one-on-one dynamo. I think he could be that, but that's not what made him so successful his rookie year, is the fact that he did all the ancillary stuff. If he adds that to the equation, then he's a megastar.
Yeah, like, that honestly could be the best way to develop him, is to let him get like opportunities doing that kind of stuff. Like, to me, that's fun. Just let's go crazy with it.
Absolutely.
Jason Tatum is number 5 and Donovan Mitchell is number 4. 4 and 3 were really, really tough assessments for me, I would say. I'll just say right now, number 3 is Devin Booker. Really, I picked one over the other because Devin is just slightly more proven, in my opinion. I know that Donovan actually has proven it in the playoffs, and that is a different beast entirely. The fact that he averaged 24 points a night on 42% from the field and shot 90% on 4 free throw attempts. Like, he had a 51 true shooting percentage, but he carried a Utah team offensively to the second round as a rookie. That is bananas to me. The efficiency stuff does worry me slightly, and just like I just think Devin's done a little bit more so far. and they're about the same age. So you could flip these guys either way you wanted. But Donovan is unbelievable. Donovan is a future absolute superstar, just an absolute megastar in the NBA, I think.
This is another area or corner of Twitter that I don't really care for, the constant comparisons between these two. So I think grouping them similarly was probably the best political move. I prefer Mitchell. That's my lean. I just think the defense gives him a higher floor on that end in the playoffs, because I do trust him to switch and then be a good on-ball defender, because he was that coming in. I think he'd probably be a little bit better than his rookie year where he was just tasked with a ton of usage. But for all these guys, you're going to name stats historically that they're very hard to counter. Like Devin Booker scoring stats on his kind of efficiency at his age, it's just hard to counter any of that, right? Because we're seeing a lot of like Jason Tatum, like what you just noted with him historically. It's just very hard to have arguments to the contrary. And with Mitchell, at least, I just think the tape backs it up. Like, what more does this guy have to fucking prove? Like, he was in the playoffs. He was Utah's best player in the playoffs. He was the guy that was like, I'm getting a basket. Like some of the quarters, I can't remember what quarter it was. Was it Oklahoma City? I can't remember what he did.
Yeah, it was Oklahoma fourth quarter. City.
But my God, dude, like rookies don't do that. You know what I mean? No. Like we rarely ever see that. That's something I don't think I've seen from a rookie in that high leverage of a situation. So I've talked about Mitchell ad nauseum. I don't really have much to add outside of that. I think that for me, he's the best player in that class, which is reflected in your rankings. I would bet on him number one, just because I believe in his initiator upside a little bit more than Tatum's kind of wing potential. I just think that Mitchell is in a position to impact the game more in that respect. Both guys are insane. Like I wouldn't have qualms if you ranked Tatum ahead of Mitchell ahead of Tatum. We're talking about the elite of the elites. Maybe we see them take an extra progressive step, and that's what separates them. Like Mitchell can still get better. He gets that pull up down, it's over. He can be the best player in the league. He has that kind of upside. Yeah, like here's your last 11 players to average 20 points on a 54% true shooting percentage as rookies. Donovan Mitchell, Joel Embiid, Blake Griffin, Tim Duncan, Shaq, Alonzo Mourning, David Robinson, Mitch Richmond, Michael Jordan, Akeem Olajuwon, Ralph Sampson. All Hall of Famers, except for maybe Blake. And the only reason that Blake won't make the Hall of Fame is because of injuries if he doesn't make the Hall of Fame. So it's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable, the kind of conversation that he has placed himself in already as an NBA player. I just believe in him being an absolute superstar in this league. Like, I think he is going to be everything that you could ask for, from someone that Utah fans can latch onto, from someone who does the right things in his community. Like, he really gives a fuck about his community, and that's terrific. Like, I love it. On the floor, again, like, you're splitting hairs between Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell. I mean, like, Devin's a better shooter. He's more efficient. He is... I don't know. Like, I would say Devin's probably a slightly better passer than Donovan right now. That's really close. I think Devin improved enough this past season where that's a pretty interesting argument. I don't even know which way I would come down on that.
Yeah, like, I honestly would probably say Devin. Like, Donovan's obviously a much better defender than Devin Booker is. But Donovan's size presents questions about the way that he will be hunted a little bit defensively, potentially, if only to tire him out. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can create a world where opposing teams just go at him with bigger players like Kevin Durant and Paul George and like other, players that are just bigger, and try and get him in switches so that he wears down, so that he's more tired offensively.
Yeah, I don't see it being a weakness. Like, he's so strong and he's long enough.
Again, but splitting hairs here. Like, I'm not. Yeah.
I think teams would roast Booker in a lot of matchups defensively, but you already noted that Mitchell's a much better defensive player.
Yeah,
I think the weakness with Mitchell is, honestly, I think he's in a great situation. I love the Jazz. I've been very complimentary of their front office, the coaching staff, but they need a second guy. Gobert's great for what he is. He's fantastic, great player. Mm-hmm. But they need one more perimeter guy, because I think that what you said has some credence. How much can he hold up if he's at the usage he was last year, and he has to do kind of everything creation-wise? Like, Rubio can pass. He has really great games as far as getting hot, but when they need a basket, there's only one guy on their team that can get that consistently. Yeah. I think they need that second guy.
Yeah, and you know what? Despite the fact that he was the only guy that could do it, he did it against Oklahoma City.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what more does this guy have to do? He lived up. We talked about this in the playoff podcast last year. It was just kind of unfathomable. Every time we talked, it was like, he did it again. He did it again. Like, what more can this dude do in big moments? That's why It's hard because Booker has done so much in the regular season, and I guess we can talk about him a little bit more now.
Yeah, let's just jump into Devin.
But I mean, Mitchell's like what he did in the playoffs for that age is just unbelievable, man. Yeah,
I mean, I'm already part regretting this, like having Donovan below Devin Booker, but I've come too far. Yeah, like with Devin, I like the fact that he can play both on or off ball. I like the fact that he's a little bit bigger. Again, I do genuinely think he's probably a slightly better passer at this stage whenever he decides to go down that route. I mean, the guy is 21 years old and averaged 25 points a game last year. That is impossible. Like, it is insane to be able to post that level of scoring prowess at that age with above average efficiency. It just does not make sense to me that someone could be that good as a scorer. I genuinely believe Devin Booker is going to go down as one of the 20 best scorers in NBA history. Like, at the very least, that is just where we're at.
It's hard to really argue with that based on the production so far. And let's be clear about something. It's not like Booker's been in a great situation. It's the opposite of that. I think he deserves a ton of credit for being efficient on high usage, even though it hasn't equated to winning. Like, what parts around him are really conducive to that he's played with the last 2 years? Coaching included for the most part with like Earl Watson. So it's not like this guy has been given this situation to really excel. He's made a lot with what he's made it. He's been great for what he's had to work with. I think that the efficiency is really important. I think that kind of it's a two-way street. You could say, yes, it hasn't equated to winning yet. That's the primary argument against Devin Booker outside of the defense is, yes, he's putting up really good stats on a bad team. But I also think the fact that he's doing this with very reasonable efficiency on an egregiously bad team in the past is a huge point forward, because it's gonna get easier for him now. Like, as far as the coaching, as far as the personnel surrounding, he has more shooting around him, like we touched on in the Suns pod. So I think that you have to look at it from that vantage point too. It's not just about, okay, this guy's made the playoffs. It hasn't really materialized into anything really that positive, contributing to winning. It's also like he's done all this despite playing in one of the worst situations in the league. That's going to get better.
So Devin Booker, I'm just going to give you some historical kind of numbers here. He's younger than Donovan Mitchell, for what it's worth. And among players who are 21 years or younger from the inception of the NBA, essentially, here are your players who have averaged 24.5 points a game on at least a 56% true shooting percentage. Carmelo Anthony, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Karl Towns, Devin Booker. It's real good. It's real good. I understand why you would have Donovan Mitchell ahead of him, because he's proven it in the playoffs. He has shown that he can be the guy to lead a team. In terms of personality, I mean, like, I would bet on Donovan over Devin Booker. It's not a slight to Devin. It's more of a compliment to Donovan Mitchell. I think he's just an unbelievable cult. He's like a cult of personality. You know what I mean? So that's what I would do. But for this list, it's hard for me to go with Donovan Mitchell over Devin Booker, just because Devin has proven so much as a scorer already.
And that's fair. Honestly, I think you're kind of nitpicking. I lean pretty strongly Donovan, but I'm building a lot of projection into this. Like, I think that Donovan's more athletic. He can get to his spots. He gets to the rim easier than Booker does. And he's also awesome off the catch. Like, Donovan's a really good shooter. He took a lot of pull-up shots last year, but off the catch, he's 86th percentile on 211 attempts. Like, this dude can shoot the hell out of the ball off the catch. So he can play off the ball, he can play on the ball, but the defense is really what the dividing factor is for me. Like, I like two-way players. If you start talking about the elites, I think you have to kind of nitpick a little bit to find extra value, and I just trust Mitchell more in the playoffs as far as not being a defensive liability. He wasn't a defensive liability last year as a rookie. So I think you can profile him pretty easily as a two-way guy. Maybe Devin's more efficient scorer. I think I just value Mitchell a little bit higher. But again, I think both sides are very defensible.
Yeah, and you know what? We're going to have this conversation again next year, because they are both eligible for the list again next year. And I would imagine that this debate continues to rage on going forward throughout the rest of their careers. Number 2, Karl Towns. I have Towns at number 2 again. This is where he was last year. When I started this, I expected him to be number 1. I ultimately decided to not do that. The reason being the defense. I downgraded him because of the defense. If I was betting, you would have Towns at 3 or 4, correct?
Yeah, tentatively around there. I would have Simmons and Mitchell ahead of him pretty clearly. Same tier, but I would have them ahead. So maybe 3, 4. It's tough, yeah.
Yeah, so I've gone with Towns because I think he is probably, just based off of what he's done already at his age, the most productive big man scorer that we've seen, like, in the league, like, in history.
Just keep going, dude. Keep reeling it off.
Well, he's just unbelievable. Like, we've never seen a 22-year-old shoot 42% from 3 and average 23 points a game over the course of a 2-season stretch and 12 rebounds added to it while passing the ball at his level, attacking closeouts at his level. He's the perfect modern big man offensive weapon in every way.
In 154 attempts in catch and shoot situations on the half court, he was 86th percentile, 68.8 adjusted field goal percentage. Like, that just doesn't happen for like a 7-foot guy. His mechanics are just insane. The self-creation ability as a closeout attacker, the dribbling acumen, he has everything you look for offensively outside of not being Nikola Jokic as a passer, but he's actually pretty underrated, I think, as a passer. So he meets that threshold. Like, what else do you really want offensively from a big? He's not optimizing their system. He can get more shots. It's not like he's being put in the absolute best situation to succeed either. You know what I mean? He's not playing with like high-level passers. Jimmy Butler's a pretty good passer, not elite. Wiggins isn't great. Teague is okay for a point guard. It's not like the situation's great either. So he's kind of like Devin Booker in some ways in that he's been this offensively in a situation that isn't really tapping into his ultimate ceiling.
Karl Towns averaged 21 points a game this year, despite the fact that he was the guy who took the 3rd most shots on the Minnesota Timberwolves per game. He took, oh boy, he took the 5th most shots if you account for Derrick Rose and Jamal Crawford on a per minute basis.
That's really fucking depressing, dude. That might be the most depressing point right on this podcast to date.
What is going on in Minnesota?
Yeah, you have the best offensive 5 that we've seen in some time, and he's 5th in shots per minute on that team. It's not a great look.
Oh my. Yeah. And it was like that in the playoffs as well. He was 5th in shots per minute. My brain does not comprehend how that can be possible. But, when Derrick Rose is taking 17 shots per 36 minutes and Karl Towns is taking 12 and a half, what are we doing here? Like, we got to figure out a way to optimize Karl Towns in Minnesota because there's no reason for this to be happening. And look, like, Minnesota's argument, I am certain, would be, we had the 4th best offense in the league last year. Did it matter that he got the 3rd most shots? Yes, it does. Yes, it absolutely does, because they would have they probably would have had the 3rd best offense at the very least. There was a pretty substantial difference in what Houston and Golden State were. And if I remember correctly, I want to say Cleveland was up there as well, right?
I think so. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but that makes sense with LeBron. But I think your point, they can get better offensively if they optimize Karl more. And I get it. Like, sometimes in the playoffs, like, he couldn't carve out space on the block. He's a good post player. He's a really good post player. But sometimes he comes into matchups where you confront him. This is just more of an issue with the modern game and being able to take away post players. But they can still use him in different ways. Like, he can initiate your offense, kind of run dribble handoffs. He's that coordinated, and he has a pull-up threat. Like, he can shoot threes. So just utilize him, get a little bit more creative in the way that utilize him. I'd rather have him with the ball and dribble handoffs, for example, than I would Derrick Rose one-on-one. Like, that's not even close to me. Yeah. You look like you just took like a couple bullets.
I just am. It's so hard for me to believe that he would not take the most shots. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? He's very clearly, like, okay, maybe Jimmy Butler, just because he'll have the ball in his hands more.
Yes.
But Andrew Wiggins, Jamal Crawford, and Derrick Rose should not have more substantial roles on offense when they're on the floor than Karl Towns. That's just unbelievable. It's incredible.
Yeah, 100%. And I do agree with your Jimmy Butler point. I mean, it's just hard. again, every team needs a perimeter player. Usually those guys are going to take more shots because it's easier to get them off when you're in face-up situations. But you have to be able to get Towns more shots. And maybe that is a motivator that compels him to play better defense. I mean, maybe he's the kind of guy who needs to have it going offensively, even though he's already had it going offensively to historic rates. So there might not be that much credence to the argument. But maybe if you up his volume, he tries harder defensively. I don't know. I'm kind of pulling strings on the defensive side because if he gets his defense to average level, we really have something here. Like as far as like generationally special, he's already a generational offensive player. He can be a generational overall player if he ups his defense.
Yeah, I mean, if he ups his, like, we had this conversation during the Minnesota thing. Like, I still think he's going to be an MVP candidate, like, regularly at some point. I just believe that he can do that. Like, I think that he has that skill. I think he has that, hopefully, that mindset. He's a very smart dude. He is someone who cares about his craft. Like, I think that he will get better at some point defensively because he has the tools to do it. He is a lumberer. Like, there's no question there. He's always been a lumberer defensively. I always thought that his defensive upside was slightly overstated in that I think some people thought he was like an potential like all defense team guy.
Yeah.
I never really got that, but I think he can be an above average defender in the NBA. And if he gets there and averages 30 points a night, which I think he will at some point, he is like he's very, very different than Shaq, but he's like new age Shaq. He's modern Shaq, right?
Yeah, definitely in different ways. It's just kind of a funny stat. Field goal percentage by distance from 16 feet to the three-point line, he was 50% last year. That is like,
impossible.
I mean, obviously you don't want a lot of those shots, and I think only like 8.9% of his shots came from there. But good God, dude, 50% from the field in that range is just absolutely ridiculous for a big. I just, every time you see a shooting stat with him, I still don't think people understand it. Like when you talk about him, he's like a generational shooter. He's one of the best big man shooters we've seen who can also score and like self-create. It just doesn't happen. Yeah,
like we talked about Lauri Markkanen being just an unbelievable shooter, and he is. Like Lauri Markkanen is probably, like, I would probably trust Lauri Markkanen shooting off of screens and on the move a little bit more than I would trust Towns. Like, I just trust the stroke a little bit more. He's proven it a little bit more. Towns is a bit better from like a standstill or from pick and pop scenarios, but he's so good. He's just so ridiculous as a shooter.
Yeah, and I think Lauri, of course, this is going back a little bit in history, but he deserved to be like considered like the best big man prospect shooter just because Towns didn't get a chance to do this at Kentucky. But I mean, It's pretty clearly the case. Like the dude, sometimes in personal workouts when there's a huge overreaction and everybody's buzzing about it, we see this every once in a while. We saw it with Towns and Porzingis. Both those guys were in gyms. Everybody walked away from that being like, holy shit, what did we just see? These guys could shoot the living hell out of the ball. Maybe that matters. I mean, clearly Towns is an all-time shooter. Yeah. That's pretty clear at this point.
But like we knew too, and like I'm not like discrediting this, but we knew Towns could shoot coming into the league. You know what I mean? Like even before that workout, he shot it in high school. He just didn't do it in college. Like, we knew this.
Yes, we did know he could shoot. I did not, of course, expect him to shoot like this.
Yeah. No, he's
like
ridiculous.
Elite, all that. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And, like, you throw in the fact that he's an unbelievable post threat. He just hammers mismatches. He's just a monster. Like, in every single sense of the word. If he starts, like, running pick and rolls, like, as the ball handler, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. Do it, man.
I'm here for it, for damn sure. Again, I just don't think people got to stop comparing prospects to Towns as an offensive player. It just doesn't happen. Nobody has this array of skills. Nobody's this good of a shooter and a self-creator. It's just Jokic, you can attribute the same level of value, Boogie Cousins, but they're not even as good as shooters as Towns is. It's just a different kind of dude, man.
Yeah, no, he is completely inhuman offensively. Again, like defensively, it's attentiveness stuff. Again, like I just want to point out an offensive number because I just pulled it up. Minnesota was 12 points per 100 possessions better offensively when he was on the floor last year than when he was off the floor. Their offense fell apart. He was the driving force behind their offense. Like we can talk about Jimmy Butler being unbelievable and being very, very good at basketball, and we can talk about Andrew Wiggins like being able to create his own shot, but like Karl Towns is the Minnesota offense. He's the reason that the Minnesota offense was fourth in the NBA last year.
And that is insanely rare for a big to have that kind of offensive effect. We're talking about, if you, again, going by advanced metrics, there's like 4 bigs in the league, centers that have like dynamic offensive ability, but to have like a 12-point difference in your offense is just insane.
Yeah, like for what it's worth, like Jimmy Butler's, they were 6 points better. And Jimmy Butler, again, unbelievable. Way better defensively. They were 7 points better defensively when he was on the floor. I don't mean to discredit Jimmy Butler when I say this, but like Karl Towns he's the marginal advantage. He's the mismatch. He is the danger. Like it's it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Towns is a better offensive player. Jimmy Butler is a better overall player right now. We're not discrediting Jimmy Butler. Like, he's already proven it. Yeah. He's that effective. It's just Towns is ridiculously good on offense.
Yeah, and in terms of where Towns goes from here, I think he's going to get better as a passer. He just continues to get better at it. I think he's going to get better as a defender. He showed last year in the playoffs that he needs to adjust better to defensive attention as it is laid at his feet. That's a real concern, I think. Like the fact that he struggled as much as he did in the playoffs. And look, like I don't mean to say like it was all on him. They struggled to get him the ball, but his true shooting percentage dropped to 54%. Like he did struggle to get the ball in spots where he was going to be successful with it.
Yeah, and it's worth noting he's not the same kind of physical specimen as Embiid, where you can just hammer him in the post. Embiid, you can't possibly keep him away from the ball when he gets his body on you. Like, you can Towns is great at posting up. He's really good at mismatches and stuff, but you can kind of body him a little bit. You can get into his legs. You can kind of push him off his spots a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think Houston did that pretty effectively. A lot of it was ball denial stuff and like overloading, which you can do when your teams aren't great shooters. I mean, you can always help off the weak side guys, Derrick Rose, for example. But yeah, I don't think Towns is quite. I mean, he's definitely not Embiid. He's not like Shaq. So he's not going to get to his spots every single time on the block. He's not built that way.
Can we also just real quick mention the Towns-Jokic game in Game 82 last year, where Jokic dropped 35 and 10 and Towns dropped like 26 and 14, and they were both just like going at each other and dominating each other. That was one of the most fun games, and not only because of the stakes, obviously the winner got into the playoffs, but like just in terms of individual matchups, like watching those two battle back and forth with each other was amazing.
Oh, yeah, I remember where I was for that one. That was actually during the Hoop Summit, where a bunch of the media went to the Draft Express, now ESPN guys' hotel. We were all watching that in the lobby, and it was insane. Like, that game was I remember exactly what happened. I remember exactly where I was. It was a special game.
Yeah. Defensively, there's upside. I think the question is how much. We've belabored that point already. But number one, I think, is going to hashtag, we're going to have to embrace debate on this one. I don't think most people would have Ben Simmons at number one for some reason. Like, there are just enough people out there that think Donovan Mitchell should have been Rookie of the Year, that my guess is that most people would not have Ben Simmons at number one. I do, obviously. I think that his combination of body control, explosiveness, ball handling ability, passing ability, vision, defense, defensive instincts, switchability, ability to finish at the basket. Literally everything but the jump shot is already there.
Yes, and I would have him number one as well, just because I feel like a lot of these guys, I mean, nobody's a perfect player. Like, there isn't a LeBron in the next generation. There just isn't that guy who's like the surefire dude, right? If Ben Simmons, we hear about the shooting working in the offseason. If he changes his shooting hand, if Ben Simmons gets a pull-up jumper, he's number one. And he's easily, in my opinion, like I would have him in the same tier as these guys, but he is easily number one if that happens. He's good at everything else, and he's versatile as all hell.
Well, if he gets a pull-up jump shot, he is LeBron. Like, genuinely, I think that. Like, he is that good. If he gets a pull-up jump shot, you're talking about a guy averaging 24, 9, and 9 with, like, all defense level team defense.
Yeah, I think he's not quite LeBron as a finisher. He's just not that explosive. We talked about this in the past as far as that. But he's
he's not LeBron. That was an overstatement. I will apologize. He is not LeBron, but he is a close approximation.
As close as we'll ever see. He's as close as we'll ever see if that happens. That I feel comfortable saying. Like, he has everything else at a high level. And again, Philly hasn't really tapped into all his versatility yet, as far as screener, his versatility there, how dynamic he can be. For me, this is kind of a controversial take, but I feel like he's the safest guy to like maybe a top 5 player, but I feel like the lack of a jump shot limits him to being the best player in the league the most, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because how many guys are the best player in the league who can't shoot off the dribble historically? I just don't know if that player really exists. Yeah, that's big man though. That's tough. Like, but that's good. Yeah, point taken. Tim Duncan too. But like, let's say for perimeter, like it's not like Ben Simmons isn't like an interior player for the most part. He's more perimeter. So let's say perimeter players being the number one overall player in the league. It's very hard to get to that if you don't have a pull-up jumper. But man, I do feel the best about him getting to top 5 in the league value. He
took 8 shots off the catch last year, 145 off the dribble. He did make 32.4% of those shots off the dribble. I think he didn't take any threes last year, correct?
Oh, yes, correct.
The thing that I think having Markelle Fultz around potentially could do is unlock him as a screener and as like the roll man, because he has potential to be an absolute superstar in that regard. Like if you are able to play him as the roll man and short roll him and roll him to the basket and throw lobs and do all of this stuff, like you can let him just dominate defenses inside out if you can play him as the roll man. And then you can have him pop out and run like a secondary screen and roll and get the defense like totally scrambling. And like there are just so many options if they have a second ball handler on the floor with him.
Exactly right. And I think that's the part that goes underlooked is the versatility. He's just, for a lot of players, this wouldn't be the case. A lot of these players aren't this versatile. Like him and Giannis are just mismatch creators. And obviously there's differences in the players. Ben Simmons is much better passer. But that's how you get to a top 12-ish player in the league to a top 5, is that versatility and being that able to post mismatches, dive to the rim, short roll guy. Can you imagine this guy in a short roll? Like it's over. Like he will make every right read. He's athletic as all hell. He can get to the rim. It's just if you put him in those kinds of situations, he becomes in some ways like supercharged Draymond on offense with way better athleticism and finishing acumen. Like that's just a terrifying player. But I do get the point about overall the jump shot. That's what it comes down to. I think he can survive that. Clearly you do too because you have him number 1, that deficiency. If he ever gets a pull-up 3, man, like that, I just want to see it. Like that's the level because I think he rightfully gets knocked a little bit for the Boston series last year. They kind of took him away. And if you're going to be the best player in the league, you can't get taken away. You don't take LeBron away. You don't take Durant, Steph Curry, James Harden, Chris Paul. You can't take those guys away. And Simmons has to become that player where maybe Markelle unlocks that. So when you go to that coverage, when you put Al Horford on him and you sag off and he can't get to his, I mean, he's going to take a long 2. He's not proficient enough at that. If you take away his driving lanes, maybe you utilize his versatility in those respects. But I think that's going to be the difference. It's unreasonable to expect him to ever develop a pull-up 3. But if he does, again, easily the best player in the league to me. And that even goes for Giannis and Joel Embiid as well.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you there. If he develops a jump shot in any regard, he is the league's best player. I'm willing to bet on him developing something of a pull-up. I don't know if it'll be enough. Like the fact that he is already, like he took 150 pull-ups last year. He made them at, again, a 32% clip. It's a semblance there. You know what I mean? Like what I think like Dennis Smith was worse than that, right? In terms of like points per possession.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Simmons' jump shots, those are all basically emergency elbow pull-ups. He'll go to that, and I mean, they don't look good. He's drifting backwards. Mechanically, it doesn't look good at all.
Oh,
but I think
he's awful. Yeah.
But like, if you're the opponent, you're living with that because there's no way the Sixers are beating you if he's taking those shots consistently.
Yep. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. But the fact that the semblance is already there makes me think that there's a base with which he can grow as a jump shooter. And if he does that, again, game over. And, you know, we haven't talked about the rest of it already. Like the fact that he is a, unbelievable defensive rebounder. The fact that he is a, like one of the 5 best passers in the NBA already, probably. The one thing that I think he could stand to improve is just generally, he does make some trash decisions from time to time. Like just passes that you wonder what he saw. Because, you know, he thinks the game at a totally different plane than what I think most people in the NBA do. So, like, what does he see? Sometimes I think it's just he tries to force the issue too much and makes a terrible mistake.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, in that Boston series, again, defensively, a lot of the decisions he was making weren't good. Like, I just didn't think he had a very good series overall. And it's a little hard to be on a player like that when it's his rookie year, first full year in the league, you're playing in a high leverage situation like that. I'm very curious to see how he responds to that series, because I do think you could make an argument he was kind of exposed, even though we both still have him as the number one prospect. So I want to see how he counters that, because I did feel like his rotations were a touch late. I thought the same thing about Joel Embiid. That was more of an in-shape issue, but those two guys, I think there is still untapped potential with both of those players. I think that the ceilings on both are immeasurable if Joel gets in shape. If Simmons, where do you come down on the shooting as far as like switching to his offhand? Are you of that mind, or do you like just stick with the left?
No, I'm never a switch shooting hands guy. I think that's too much of a rewrite. Do what I understand that he is right-handed and that he finishes better right-handed, but I think that just naturally from shooting left-handed for so long, you're going to have a better base naturally to improve from.
I think that's reasonable. This is maybe the only case I'll ever make for switching your shooting hand, just because he's so damn good and everything else. It's not like a Lonzo situation where if Lonzo loses his shooting, like he becomes significantly less appealing, in my opinion. He's still a great team defender, but how good you can really be if you can't create for yourself, and he doesn't have near Simmons' versatility. So with Simmons, I think he's already so damn good. We just never see any signs of him shooting like a pull-up three, for example. He's just never shown it, right? So I think what is the harm in experimenting when your recourse is like an emergency elbow jumper? You know what I mean? Like, he's not really even doing that consistently. That's like a late in the shot clock kind of thing, or like you just completely duck on every pick and roll, for example. So I don't know what the downside is, because I don't see him necessarily improving. Like, if you think Ben Simmons can shoot threes left, I think you have to think that like basically anybody can shoot a three that's reasonably coordinated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet, I would say, but I am. I'm at the stage where, like, look, this dude averaged 16, 9, and 8, or 16, 9, and 8 in the playoffs as a rookie. Like, I think part of us is just like overthinking this. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think we are, because he's number one on the list. I just think that he can get better. And I do think that stylistically, the way you want to attack Simmons, Boston did a masterful job at that. And I do think you have to take some takeaways. Like, at some points in that series, TJ McConnell, the offense ran better with TJ McConnell, just because he was a more consistent pull-up threat. So you have to take that into account. You also have to take into account that if Markelle returns, that's going to optimize Simmons even more than he already is, which is about as good as you can possibly get without having a jump shot.
So Ben was bad in the Boston series. As a rookie, Ben's 5 games in the Boston series were 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists a game.
That's the kind of talent he is, though.
I mean,
he's a freak show.
It's crazy. And he did it on like 48% shooting from the field. Like, it wasn't a disaster there either. It's just hard for me to like think of this as like some, significant drawback with Ben Simmons, but you're right. Like, he does need to shoot the basketball better. He needs to at least develop that semblance to become a like top 5, not even like top 5, but like top 1 player in the league, I guess. Like, if he can pull up at all, it's over. Defensively, he was much better than I think both of us anticipated last year. He, some people thought of him as, and we've talked about this, but like, some people thought of him as like a top 10 defender in the league in general. I would have had him more as like a top 20 forward in the NBA defensively in general. I do understand, though, why people are so excited. And like, I think he will probably make an all-defense team at some point.
I do too. And I was always higher on his defense as a prospect. I didn't think he'd be this good, this close as far as some of the technique stuff, especially in the regular season. I thought his team defense was pretty damn good, and he suffered late in the playoffs as far as revisionist history. Going back and watching the Boston series again, I thought some of his rotations were poor, his timing was poor, but he's going to defend even better in the playoffs because he is so freaking agile for his size. Like, I don't know if anybody moves like him for a 6'10" guy. He moves like a guard. He's explosive laterally, he can switch, he's a good team defender, not going to be a high-level rim protector or shot blocker, but at least he's going to be in the right place, and he can really rebound for his position at a high level. So I do believe in the defense. I think that all NBA defense, so maybe not first team, but like second, whatever team is in the cards for him, just because he's going to get better. He's going to get hopefully more mentally consistent in high leverage situations, but there's just a ton to work with.
Well, like, here's the thing, though, that also I think separates him from someone like Robert Covington. I thought he was a little bit better than Robert Covington defensively in those series. I mean, obviously, like, I think part of it with Covington was a mental thing because he started to really miss shots and it seemed like he got down on himself a little bit, Simmons is just so strong in that combination of strength and quickness. is so rare and so difficult to find. And like, that's what makes him so rare as an offensive player. It's what makes him so rare as a defensive player. That intersection of strength and quickness is, it's not LeBron level, but it is very, very high level.
For a 6'10" guy, it's almost unprecedented to have that combination. And yeah, I mean, what makes him more valuable, I think, in a playoff defensive setting than Covington? Covington's a crazy good team defender. But when you get him on switches against guards, he's going to get blitzed. Like, we saw that even in the Heat series, for example. Like, Simmons can legit switch onto a point guard and keep them in front. That, you can't say enough about that ability. And he's a good team defender. He's a really good team defender, not quite to the level of Covington, but in the playoffs, like, especially against who they're playing against. Like, we have to put this in the context of moving forward, who's their biggest adversary? It's the Boston Celtics, probably. We'll see what happens with Kawhi in Toronto long term. But Boston, you have to have guys who can switch. You have to have guys who are athletic, that can match up with Tatum, Brown, those guys. And I think that Simmons is really the only guy on the Sixers that can really do that consistently as far as a switch guy.
Dude, I think we're done. I think that it's over. I think we have finally gotten through the top 25 players, 23 and under. I will run through the list very quickly. Actually, no, I'm not, because then you won't have to listen. If you've gotten this far, you probably have. So I will. I'm very tired now, by the way. I've hit a wall. Trae Young, number 25. Josh Jackson, number 24. Number 23, Dennis Smith. Number 22, D'Angelo Russell. 21, Kyle Kuzma. 20, Myles Turner. 19, Aaron Gordon. 18, Marvin Bagley. 17, Markelle Fultz. 16, Lauri Markkanen. 15, Andrew Wiggins. 14, Lonzo Ball. 13, Jaren Jackson. 12, Jamal Murray. 11, Brandon Ingram. 10, Jaylen Brown. 9, Luka Doncic. 8, DeAndre Ayton. 7, Kristaps Porzingis. 6, Nikola Jokic. 5, Jason Tatum. 4, Donovan Mitchell. 3, Devin Booker. 2, Karl Towns. And number 1, Ben Simmons. Reading them through like that, does anything stand out to you as trash?
That's trash. No, I can't. I hit a wall where you are, man. I'm not comprehending shit anymore. This is a lot of fun, though. I think doing the divisional podcast with all the prospects, going in, I think that ended up being 5-6 podcasts, a lot of in-depth coverage, and then culminating in this top 25 for your rankings. I'm not sure if anybody's ever really done something like this on a podcast, so it's been kind of fun to go through. I think it'll be beneficial for the listeners, just more of the information. I'm sure people will have disagreements with the list. It's supposed to be by nature kind of fluid. I mean, you can kind of put guys in general areas, but sussing out the intricacies of differences with a lot of these guys is hard at this stage. So it's been fun, and hopefully it's beneficial for the listeners.
We broke down 210 players plus during that divisional series breakdown. We broke down 25 plus 10 or 15 in the first podcast of this series during this little project that we did. Thank you guys for listening, obviously. We wouldn't be doing this if these types of things didn't continue to get such strong responses. And the fact that they do continue to get such strong responses, I think, tells us to keep doing more and tells us a whole lot about what you guys are enjoying listening to. And we really appreciate the listenership. You know what I mean? Like the fact that you guys are as active with us on Twitter, giving us feedback and, everything that comes with a project like this. It is, it's a lot, and your feedback really does mean a lot to us. And the listenership that has continued to grow over this process also does really mean a lot to us.
And just building off that, if you have any negative feedback, you can tweet that at Sam_Vicini. To use a bad boys line, don't tweet me, don't fax me, don't call me. I'm going to delete my Twitter. But in all seriousness, any kind of feedback that you guys provide via Twitter, definitely do that. I always enjoy seeing the different arguments, and I'm all for diversity of thought. So I appreciate you guys listening. This has been really fun.
Yeah, and here's the last little thing. This is now why I'm going on vacation, is because we now have done, I think, 11 podcasts breaking down all of these players. Genuinely thank you. Please, to get the word out about the podcast, if you enjoyed this series, please rate, review, subscribe, everything that goes along those lines. It really helps us move up in the ratings. It really helps us get the word out about the podcast. Everything that comes along with that, just continue to get the word out. It really does help us a lot. And Cole, go follow his work at the Stepien. Do you have anything you want to plug particularly that you think is coming?
In theory, my Twitter handle is @ColesWicker. I'm not sure if it'll still be there by the time this gets released, but other than that, I should have more pieces on the Stepien coming up, breaking down some of the 2019 guys, which we will eventually get to on this podcast, covering the next class, because that's always fun for us, especially for me, because I don't get to watch that as much as Sam does on lower levels. So I'm diving into that tape pretty intricately right now. Should have the top 30 to 40 guys ironed out by the time Sam gets back from Australia. So again, check out the Stepien and continue to listen to this podcast.
So the next 4 podcasts are going to be with Dieter Kurtenbach. We're going to be breaking down every single NBA team's over-under in pretty strong detail. So, if you're a gambler, if you're not a gambler and you just want to hear more about teams in the Eastern Conference and in the Western Conference, we broke them out alphabetically, 2 podcasts per conference. So, each of these podcasts is something like an hour 20 minutes. I've recorded the Eastern Conference already with him. So, shout out Dwayne Wade and Udonis Haslem for, or Pat Riley saying those 2 were going to sign whenever we, weren't sure if they were going to whenever we did the podcast last night. But thank you all for listening. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your August. Again, I'm going to be on vacation. I'll be, intermittently checking Twitter just because, a lot of it is just like kind of going to relax and trying to, get away from work for a little while. Not that I don't love my job, but like it, I'll be relaxing. And at some point I'll look at my computer. At some point I'll look at my phone and stop reading and stop watching Twin Peaks again. So, just reach out to me. Feel free anytime, and reach out to Cole whenever you want to yell. And until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.